Good evening. We have a special city council meeting this evening, Wednesday, August 26th, 2020. Let's start with a roll call and determination of quorum, please.
Nordstrom.
Here.
Roberts. Stroman.
Here.
Armstrong.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Lehman.
Here.
Solomon.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Drew.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now we will move to the adoption of the agenda. I have a motion by Mr. Jones and a second by Mr. Lehman. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now we'll move to the general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. No items will be added to the agenda per state statute for special meetings. Do we have any? Okay, I didn't get that, a little slow. Okay. All right, thank you. Now public comment is closed. Now we'll move on to our hearing items. We'll open public comment, items 1 through 4, and closed. And now we will move to item number 1, a City Council discussion for the Mayor's 2021 budget. I'll open that up for discussion. Mr. Nordstrom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciate all the time the mayors and the staff has put together, directors and everyone else has put into this budget. Bringing it forward is that it is a balanced budget, but I like to look a little deeper into the budget as well. And it, for me, I'm very comfortable because it is balanced throughout, because it is very close to my concept of a priority-based budget. The other part of it that I'm supporting on this is that it is also a community needs budget. So it more or less says what we, the city or city council, would like to see in the budget and what our ideals, what our goals are. And this year it seems like everything is on pause, so we kind of have to rein in most everything this time around. And this budget that's been presented to us seems to have done that effort on it. So again, for me, it's a community needs assessment budget. This virus has also affected a lot of other things within the community and has put a big delay on a lot of things that we would like to do. But if we can just kind of hang on for a little bit, and the mayor's proposal to put most of the COVID or CARES Act money into the undesignated cash, so we can have a longer look at that and address the needs a little bit better for the community, and better use of or utilization of that funding as well. So I just urge caution that we don't get too extravagant at this stage just yet. So yes, there is a lot of needs, a lot of wishes, a lot of desires, but right now we have to put them in the wants category. That's all I've got at the moment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Excellent points, Mr. Nordstrom. Mr. Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Two things I want to comment on. I very much appreciate the mayor taking the aggressive step to plug in that large chunk of money to try to return things to a sense of normalcy, get the budget back to where it needs to be, funding back to where it needs to be, or at least as close as it can be. If we, as the city leaders, the city government, don't take aggressive steps to try to get us moving forward and back to where we need to be, who will? And they say put your money where your mouth is. The mayor's done that with plugging in the undesignated money into those places to fill the gaps. I know from time to time, living in Rapid City almost all my life, when the term undesignated funds comes forward, some people grumble, some people get mad and say, well, how can it be undesignated? And, you know, it's a lot to understand. But I think using it at this time for this reason is wise. It makes sense. And if we do it, hopefully others will think more towards moving forward and doing what we need to do to get back to whatever normal is and not keep being afraid of the future. There are things to be afraid of and concerned about. I'm not saying that. But this is a big, bold step for us to do, and I applaud it, and I think it's a great idea. My second item is a couple weeks ago, Commissioners Nordstrom, Evans, and I had the opportunity to tour our solid waste facility, the MRF, and all the recycling that goes on out there. And we were amazed at what we saw. The quality of work, amazed in a good way. The quality of work that's taking place out there, the kind of equipment they use. I did not know that the solid waste was an enterprise fund, and that a lot of what they do, they operate off of the fees they charge and the money that they bring in from recycling. If people did more recycling, use the blue bin at their homes, that would generate more revenue, and costs would either stabilize or maybe even come down. And it was amazing to me to discover that. So I really would encourage our citizens to get the blue bin and recycle. It's easy. You just throw your recycles in there and the city picks it up. And right now, milk jugs, they said, are what they're making the most on. So that would be a great way for citizens to take a more active role and to help generate funds to help the city do the things that they want them to do. So those are my two comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Evans, you have the floor.
Just to add on to what Mr. Jones said, it is an impressive facility, and I think Rapid City has to be commended for being so state-of-the-art. 25 years ago, when that was all kind of starting out, and we're at the stage with this new study where we're going to decide whether or not we're going to move to the forefront again, and I hope we will, in terms of recycling and efficiency out there. And I know there are two proposals to fund 2 more positions in the city staffing. But one position that's gone unfunded has been a position out there that was particularly dedicated toward recycling and sustainability and everything. And I think if we're going to move in that direction, and I hope everybody feels the same as I do in terms of state-of-the-art recycling and solid waste disposal, I think that's a position that truly needs to be funded. And I don't know if it's still in the current budget and just hasn't been filled, or whether or not it's something that's sort of been dropped. So I think we need to keep our eye on that one, because if we're going to move in that direction, it's going to be better if somebody that's an expert in that area can kind of drive it, and that can be the thing they champion. Thank you.
Ms. Drew, you have the floor.
Okay, well, I really appreciate all the work the mayor's done, and this budget looks great to me. It looks kind of familiar to me, so I don't have a lot of heartburn over this. For those people who were coming before us a couple of weeks ago with concerns for housing, just so that you know, there are groups that are looking into that. That will help with some of the situations that may or may not happen because of evictions. But the South Dakota Housing has got an extra $5.5 million this year to work on housing. We are helping to lobby them so more of that money comes West River, because we believe that our problems are more significant than problems East River. And I think most of you would agree. There's also the Low-Income Housing Mitigation Committee, which is working on this as well. That's groups from our Hope Center, or not the Hope Center, excuse me, the One Heart group that's going to be operating, and also Barry Tyson, some of those other names that you know that work on these types of projects, along with the Vukurovich Foundation. They're working on some of these answers as well. So those answers won't be coming from us so much this year, because we definitely need our police to be fully funded. I don't think I'm talking out of school when I say we've seen the crime rate and the homicide rates just this month. And so we need those police to be fully funded and on the job. So that's not anything that I'm going to look at in this budget. As we talked about a little bit about recycling, there was an educational position for recycling at the solid waste division. That position was cut because although she worked in the schools and she did a lot of outreach, it didn't move the meter at all. And so it possibly could be something that we'd look at to come back in a future budget, or maybe the people at solid waste could find a way to fund that position. But right now, we have no one that is doing that kind of work in our schools. And I think that would be important. And I don't know how you educate the adults to do that, but usually we hope that the students will take that information home. I just don't think that really the trickle-up theory did not work in this case. So that's something that I would like to see in the future. I'm just leaving that out there. It's not something that I'm going to advocate for in this budget. But those are some of the things that I thought were important that we should talk about, since we saw so many people lobbying us for low-income housing funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drew. Jason Solomon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I want to acknowledge a city staffer. She did something I think that happens probably more frequently. Siri is trying to talk to me, apparently. You're not invited to this meeting. City staffers, not Siri. That's kind of eerie. Didn't mean to rhyme. So our finance officer, Pauline Sumption, has, we got a note this week that she's refinancing one of our bonds and getting us a lower interest rate and reducing 4 years off of the bond, saving the city $2.3 million. That's tremendous. I applaud you. Thank you. And I know other department heads always look at ways to reduce costs, and I think that's Pauline is an example of being proactive and looking at our contracts, looking at things like loan rates, maybe innovative ways to do things so that we can run as lean as possible and take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us, even during terrible times like this. But interest rates are very low, and so looking at, is now the right time to refinance, and what would that do? So when you have a city staffer save the city $2.3 million, she's more than paid for her own salary in a year. I'm kidding. Hardy har har. Or your career, yeah. It's government work after all. So for one, I just want to acknowledge that, because I think that's very significant. Whenever you're doing a budget, the first thing you're trying to do is trying to come up with what does it need to take to operate the operation that year, and in this case, the city, and then what can you do to save money? And then everything else, all of our expenses should be seen as investments in a way that it's an investment to make things better. So kudos to you, Pauline, great job. I think I echo all of the council members up here when we say that, so wanted to do that. Two, I want to thank the mayor for answering my questions. Just for the sake of transparency, I asked him a series of questions. First about FTEs, and one thing I really liked is whenever our largest expense and our greatest investment is the talent that we hire and the people that work for the city. So whenever we add a position, I think it's really important that we have a justification, because sometimes it's just a +1, but when you take that on, it's really hard to remove that later. And so what we received from the mayor's office was a justification for each position from each department. There weren't a ton, there were not a lot of additional positions, but the ones that are granted, there's an explanation as to why. And I think that's so important. I love that practice, want to see that continue from here until we stop doing budgets. So that's good. And the mayor, thank you for answering my other questions. And for the sake of transparency, I think we all have a printout of my questions, but did we budget enough for snow removal? He believes we did. Why some community investments saw a slight inflationary increase while others did not, had a lot to do with what was requested and what the needs are. And these are the things we could argue about, because we all would probably do this a little differently, but we're trying to come to some sort of consensus, because my budget might look a little different than this, but so would yours, so would yours, so would yours. And so that's why it's good that the mayor works with us to try to come up with something that we all can live with. My question of who's managing the Arts Contingency Fund, and that's the Rapid City Arts Council, why the increase, and his answer was to get them back to where it used to be because we had slashed it quite a bit over the last year or two. The use of undesignated cash, Alderman Jones addressed that, as did the mayor. And then, of course, wondering how the Civic Center is doing. I guess we'll hear about that later. All that to say, I appreciate him asking us to give questions in advance. And the fact is, didn't want anybody to think that we had a budget process without all of the questions being asked. We did email back and forth, and there's a copy if anybody wants to see it. Appreciate Alderman Nordstrom saying it's good not to budget too extravagantly. I agree. I think that should be every year. So thank you. I agree with that. But making sure that we fully fund the things that need to be funded. Finally, I think this is just a caution for us, just thinking about what's up ahead. My biggest concern with the budget, and this really has to do with even beyond Rapid City, is the long tail of this pandemic and the effects that will have on our economy. For example, a very practical matter is the impact of the school system on our budget and on the local economy and on the tax revenue and growth. The fact is, a lot of employers will have to be flexible with parents as they try to navigate the challenges that we're facing. And it's not about who's wrong or right, but it's just a very real challenge that will impact productivity, that will impact business revenue, that will impact taxes. There is a long tail. There are ramifications for every decision. There's a chain of events that sets off. So even though we are not the school board, we have no jurisdiction on the school board, we do and are impacted by those decisions. And I just want us to be mindful that we use tax revenue, that's city money coming into the city, that is greatly impacted by our economy, by the idea of people can work enough hours, they can sell homes at the same price, whether the price of homes go up or down. I mean, you all know. So it's a long tail. So what we're seeing right now, what we're trying to project to 2021 is based on a current reality. There's a lot of unknowns that we don't know. And so we will have to be flexible and agile moving into the new year and beyond, and think differently and continue to look for ways to do things. But let's keep that in mind, and I think you all are very smart and bright, and I know that you get that. But I want to make sure our community understands that the long tail is real, and we need to be responsive. So with that, overall, I think the mayor has come a long way in 5 years on how he puts the budget together. This is much smoother than my first year. I have probably been better than I used to be as well, so I think we're learning lots of lessons. Overall, I think a solid, balanced budget that is realistic, not overreaching, but also not dishonest. It's about trying to play the puck where it is, and I think that's wise this year. With that, I yield.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Solomon. Mrs. Drew.
Thank you. My question actually is about the budget, and it's the attorney's budget, but I think Pauline can answer this for me, if you would. Pauline Sumption, our finance officer. I noticed that other expenses under the attorney's budget went up $80,000 from $15,000 to $95,000. So could you explain to me where that's going to go?
You bet. Actually, it went up a little bit more than that. I believe it was $1,500 originally in
okay.
2020.
Okay.
However, that is where the mayor budgeted for the HRC or whatever that becomes in the future. If you remember the presentation and looking at staffing and other things to actually give that program a more viable option, that's where he put the budget money for it.
Okay, well, that's great. That's all I needed to know. And just a little kudos on the arts funding. I have talked to some of the larger arts groups this week, and they are ecstatic about getting funded at what was the previous levels, and are looking forward to 2021. So thank you to the mayor for that.
You're done? Great. All right. Perfect. Just making sure. Okay, Mr. Nordstrom, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps just a clarification from the mayor. The question was brought up about the FTE positions And what I'm seeing is a balancing. We're going to gain one in the HRC, Human Relations Commission, but we're also losing one. Am I correct in the Human Resources or Human Relations, or excuse me, the Human
Resources.
Yeah, Human Relations Department, yes. Human Resources.
Okay. Yeah, on the general fund, we're gaining one FTE, and that's for the Human Relations Commission, or the Human Relations. Now you got me doing it. And there has been some difficulty hiring in human resources, so at this time, temporarily, we are down a position there that's not being filled, not anticipated to be filled in 2021. I just couldn't guarantee that they would have better luck down the road and bring that position back. And then the other full-time employee ads are in enterprise funds covered by revenue generated within those departments, mainly in the public works operations.
Yeah, thank you. The interest that I have is that we are fully staffed. We're fully supported in the different areas. And if the Human Resources Department is not able to fill that position, then maybe we can find out later why that's such a challenge. But for me, that's another balance for our balanced budget, looking inside the budget. So it's another one of those aspects that I look at. So thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, and we will go to Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Solomon said some great things, and I just want to comment on one thing about the school and the impact that school activities have on the money that comes into the city. School activities bring lots of people to our community all year long for games and events and that kind of thing. But the one event that brings more people and more money to a community than any other South Dakota High School Activities Association supported event is All-State Chorus and Orchestra. All-State Chorus and Orchestra brings 1,000 kids, plus their teachers, plus moms and dads and grandparents and aunts and uncles and all that, to the town for 3 days plus, and the money that is spent in a community that hosts All-State Chorus and Orchestra is larger than any other state event. So when we look at the economic impact of what school does, and thank you for saying that, because that's huge. We have to be mindful of, if those things don't happen, we will feel the impact. We'll feel it in revenue, we'll feel it in jobs lost, because hotels and restaurants and others won't be staffing, because 1,000 kids and others may or may not be coming. So those school activities we need to be mindful of, because they impact our bottom line immensely. Thank you.
Mr. Evans.
Well, I always knew that Mr. Jones was something of a genius, and his astute observation is right on, because it's true. But I want to comment on the actual formatting of the document here. I think it's really kind of a handsome budget. It's good to look at. It's easy to follow. Excuse me. Perhaps one improvement that might be made, though, I know we do this with our agenda items. We have hot links, so we can click on things and we get other things, and I think that's a really great feature we have. So as people look at something like Arts Contingency Fund, Parks and Recreation, they really don't have any idea how really comprehensive some of these things are. And so they think, well, they're spending all that money on that. Well, and then they'd click on Parks and Rec and see all of those gazillions of things that that's paying for. And that might simplify and cause a lot of people to just, oh, I guess that explains why that's what it is. So in the future, I don't know if that could happen for PDF documents online for this, but this is a perfect example of that might help answer a lot of questions that don't get answered. So just a suggestion. But other than that, it's a really good-looking document, don't you think? Thanks.
Do we have any more questions? Mayor, do you have anything that you would like to share? Okay. If I may, I'll just take a few moments. I do want to commend the directors and our departments, and especially the mayor, for working on this. This is something that we just don't pull out of our hat. You've been working on this since February, I believe, and that's always challenging. Okay, but especially during these tumultuous times with COVID, so that added an extra spin to it, so thank you. And I also wanted to show my appreciation to my colleagues here who not only through this discussion here tonight, but we've been working on this for the last couple of weeks, and I commend our two new people that really have only been a part of this council for 7 or 8 weeks, and they just dove right in, reaching out to department directors and the mayor and talking within ourselves about this. So I appreciate you doing the homework on this, because this is very important and this is what we are supposed to do. With that, I will yield and look for... Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Nordstrom and a second by Mr. Stroman. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to item number 2. Approve Resolution 2020-069 of intent to take the statutory authorized increase in property tax revenue as part of the annual appropriation ordinance for the 2021 fiscal year.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion to approve by Mrs. Drew and a second by Mr. Stroman. Any discussion? Mr. Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. How much will this bring in for the city with the increase?
Direct that to...
Sorry, I just put that page down. The mayor says 319,000, and yep, 319,457.
Thank you.
Mr. Nordstrom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is one of those items that I feel that it kind of convolutes the whole budget issue. And if there's a process that we can remove this process and include it in the budget process, I'd be very supportive of that, because I think it's a distraction, and it just makes things more complicated. So if we can remove that from the budget process, I think that and just incorporate it into the regular budget, I'd be supportive of that. But as the motion stands right now, I can support it.
I was just going to comment on Richie's comments. We are the only city that is required to have this separate ordinance, and or resolution, and we've imposed it upon ourselves. And we get asked about it all the time as to why we do that. We've always talked about the CPI as part of the budget process when we talk general fund revenues, and so I would be in support of what Richie is requesting, and if the council feels inclined to do so, I can work with Joel to get a resolution to get that repealed.
And Mrs. Drew, since she's over the legal
Oh,
and
yeah.
finance.
You mean for this budget? Oh,
Not for this budget, for future years.
Okay, Pauline, if you could just stay right there for a second. We didn't take this for a number of years, right? We just, was it 4 or 5 years? We just didn't take the CPI?
There were quite a few. Let me pull it up. Switch over to this mic. So bear with me.
I guess what I want to get to with this question, Pauline, is it kind of left us in a bad position for a while, because we had to make up this money from other places, and I think it's better to take it in this form than to wait until it builds up and we have to either cut the budget or expand taxes somewhere else.
So we did not take the CPI in 2008, 2011, 2012, or 2013. This accumulated since 2008. In total, we've lost over $11 million in property tax revenue by not taking those. It was about $1.2 million a year at the last time.
Yeah. I think we're really shooting ourselves in our wallet when we do these kinds of things. They seem minor at the time. They seem like a big thing to some folks, of course, and I respect that. but I think that when we look at the overall toll, that we would have, we should put this back into the budget, but for the, at this time, we just should approve it for this year. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving to number 3, we have the first reading, Ordinance 6441, regarding fiscal year 2021 appropriation ordinance. I have a motion for approval by Mr. Jones and a second by Mr. Nordstrom. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And number 4, discussion on future budget meeting dates.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir, you have the floor.
my recommendation is that we include it in a future city council meeting or prior to a city council meeting, whatever is required, since this one seems to have gone through with an approval.
So basically, all we need is to have second reading of the ordinance as presented tonight for first reading, and that can be on the September 8th agenda.
Are we comfortable with that? Okay, so we have a motion to move the second reading to the regular city council meeting on September 8th, and that's on a Tuesday because of the Labor Day holiday, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Part of the regular city council meeting on September 8th. We good with that? I'll make that motion. Okay, thank you, Mr. Solomon. I have a motion for that and a second by Mrs. Drew. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion carries. Move to adjourn. A motion to adjourn by Mr. Jones and a second by Mr. Stroman. I can tell by his eyes. Okay. You know what happened to my last? Oh. That's true. Thank you. We're adjourned.